Brian needs a new Mac. Brian needs to work out more. Brian needs is on Facebook. Brian needs to communicate more effectively and stop being so negative. Brian looks like Dick and Rob Lowe. Brian looks like that guy from the Old Spice commercials. Yeah. Brian looks like some light logging has begun. Brian looks like a hobbit in the jungle. Brian says, "Oh no!" Brian says, "Brush your teeth, Jenny." Brian says Steven Soderbergh's CHE is an amazing accomplishment. What's a CHE? Brian says, "Pick a card, any card." Brian says it worst when he says nothing at all. Brian said that Carrie's sex calls led to the end of the marriage. Yeah. Brian wants it in the What? Brian wants the kids back. Brian wants to stay? Question mark? Brian really wants to be Mojo's friend. Brian wants to take a nap, but thinks he'll stay awake for the last 45 minutes of his shift. Brian does Hallelujah on tour. Brian does 360s with his car. Brian does a sweet stunt. Brian does a reverse Chinese. I don't even know what that means. Brian does some grooming. Brian does the honorable thing and stands by his man. Brian does it again and again. Yeah. Brian hates these. Brian hates divorce. Brian hates emo. Brian hates babies. Brian hates cats and the Phantom Menace. Brian hates surprises. Brian hates drawing lowercase letters. Brian hates photosynthesis. Brian hates it when people tell you your shoes are untied and you look down and you're not wearing shoes. Brian asks Roger, "What did you want me to do?" Brian asks, "When's Arnold's sporting event?" Brian asks why Shane Mosley's getting a pass on his steroids test. Brian asks Amanda out on a date. Brian asks, "Do you have to be smart to be president?" Brian likes movies. Brian likes Q&A profiles. Brian likes it, so it's gotta be good. Brian likes to fiesta. Brian likes watching The View. Brian likes women's. Brian likes Dragon Ball Z and the Blue Team. Brian likes to rap. Brian eats bugs. Brian eats a sandwich. Brian can eat and breathe fire for the Chibi Project. Brian eats cake. Brian eats Braveheart. Brian eats kitty litter? Brian eats the raspberries first. Brian eats only an orange and black coffee for the days leading up to Christmas so that he doesn't gain any weight. Brian wears Prada. Brian wears a diaper. Brian wears his pedals, but only for cash. Brian wears number 20 and is from Bradenton, Florida. Brian wears Heather's hat sometimes. Brian wears multiple hats. Brian wears a mustache. Brian wears his heart on his sleeve and sometimes can't hide his emotions. Brian was arrested for battery and cruelty to animals for shooting a puppy with a bow and arrow on Tuesday. Brian was arrested for failure to appear. Brian was arrested on Friday for being drunk in public and causing a commotion. Brian was arrested last week on suspicion of drunk driving. Brian loves music. Brian loves pets. Brian loves sparklers. Brian loves his marijuana. Brian loves his Mac more than his IBM ThinkPad. Brian loves Julie. Brian loves Jessica. Brian loves Janet. Brian loves Josh. Brian loves you.